This is Let Me Sum Up, your occasional deep dive into recent reports I personally have a conflict of interest on and can't talk about. I'm Luke Menzel, recording on Wurundjeri land, and I'm joined today by two co-hosts and one special guest. Global Vice President for Marketing and Extortion at the Let Me Sum Up podcast, Frankie Muscovich. Hello, Frankie.
Good afternoon, fabulous folks. Lovely to be joining you from beautiful Gadigal country that was never ceded. Like, what do I have to extort people over today? I mean, I think we've recruited a fabulous co-host to sub in for you, Luke. So looking forward to booting you off this here show for a bit and covering all the things that you're apparently not allowed to talk about anymore with us. That's okay.
More on that later. We have a man who is nothing short of triumphant, having recently completed construction of a display unit worthy of his beloved collection of Dungeons & Dragons dice. It is Tennant Reed. G'day, Tennant.
Yes, I discovered that this programmable LED-studded complex dice shrine has just barely enough slots in it for all the dice that I possess. There are five. All of them.
All of the
good
D20s?
ones. All of the good ones.
All of the D20s.
Well, no. So there are trays behind those D20s that Luke and Frankie and as yet unintroduced special guest can see. But sitting behind those glowing illuminated D20s, there is a tray with all the rest of the dice.
Okay, so I've known you, Luke and Tennant, for a while now, and I'm now the proud owner of 2 sets of flashy D&D dice, gifts from both of you. What happens when you want to expand the collection, like inevitably?
Well, some people might say it was then time for a second glowing cube of dice storage. Other people might say, got to make some choices. Got to decide. I will say, look, there are 20 slots in that. No. So I beg your pardon. There are 25 slots in that dice display, and frankly, not every D20 on display there currently is the best. So it may be that if the spirit moves me to find an even shinier, more glittery, more embedded with tiny models of giant monsters or swirling snow globe glitter or whatever else, if such a dice set appeals to me, well, I'll just swap out one of the plain old, same old mediocre dice for that.
At a distance, it looks like a thing from a Marvel superhero movie.
It does. It looks like the Cosmic Cube.
That's exactly what it looks like. And here I am feeling at least as nerdy as you for once, Tennant.
Yeah. Well, anybody listening who might in future be on a Zoom call with me should await the day when the app to individually program each of the LEDs in this dice cube is available to me, and then perhaps you will see an L, an M, an S, and a U being spelt out in the background.
Oh boy!
Of some meetings.
I thought you were going to say you could program it to display colours that accorded with your mood during the meeting. I'm going to move on because waiting incredibly
There's more to say
patiently
about dice, Luke. All right, fine.
A woman who is paid to think through the hard problems that nobody else has the time or inclination to and loves it. It is Alison Reeve. G'day, Alison.
Hello. I'm just trying to think how many dice I've got in the house. I think there's like a Yahtzee set somewhere in the lounge room, but it's possibly only got 4 dice in it out of 5. So I'm feeling very underdiced compared to Tennant.
I know what your Christmas is going to look like now.
Yeah, it's going to be an empty LED thing, and I'll have to find something else to put in it because I can't just put my half a Yahtzee set in there.
Frankie, I'm going to say the thing that is occurred to a number of our listeners inevitably. LMSU themed Dungeons and Dragons dice.
Oh my
It's got to be in that future, right?
Oh God. I guess that was inevitable in this conversation, wasn't it? Well, I think there'll be at least 3 people I know that aren't one of you that might be interested in that. So, and I think most of these people talk to us on a regular basis in our lives outside of this here pod. So if you're interested in said merch, you can just let us know the next time you see one of us in person.
Perhaps each die could have a fragment of the true ISP embedded in the centre of it.
Oh, God. All right. We need to move on.
On this week's show, Frankie, Tennant and Alison take on a big new report on energy market governance that, due to its provenance, I can't talk about. But first, Frankie, Tennant and Alison are going to talk about a big new report on the future of energy system that, due to its provenance, I can't talk about. Yes, the Australian Energy Market Operators 2026 Integrated System Plan is live, and it makes for an interesting read. Relative to the last ISP, there is more projected demand from data centres, less projected demand from homes, and a fascinating evolution of the role that batteries are expected to play in the system relative to gas peakers. Plenty to chew over, but Tennant, given my role on the AMO board, I will now let you 3 do that chewing while I go make myself a cup of tea.
Gosh darn it.
Mental out.
So,
what do we really think?
yeah, well, look, this ISP displays the baleful influence of Luke in every page. So this is, I mean, for anybody who needs a quick, like, what is the ISP? And there must be like 2 or 3 of you out there. This is the document that plays the most central reference point role of anything currently produced by any level of government or public agency for what is the future direction of development of the biggest electricity system in the country. It doesn't actually directly determine that much, but it is a very, very widely used reference point and thing to argue about. I would say that the thing it still has the greatest influence on is what transmission projects get treated as need to happen, both by governments directly and by the economic regulation process or processes. Now we have several of them for approving the construction of particular versions of these transmission projects. But it then gets influences everything from the sense of urgency around and the design of large-scale generation encouragement policies, arguments about social licence, arguments about how much gas we're going to need or not for different purposes at different times. It's the thing at the core of a lot of what we talk about, and even to some extent do. And it's also a very, very, very evolutionary document that started in its prehistory as a transmission planning exercise and got transformed through several iterations, and the Finkel Review, one of its recommendations being the existence of an integrated system plan. So we've had multiple goes round. It's changed a little bit each time, but there's been a pretty consistent through line over that time of coal is retiring, renewables will provide the overwhelming bulk of new energy, and we have a variety of challenges to manage efficiently that swap through different mechanisms, through interregional transmission, through storage, through gas peaking. And from one biannual edition to another, the relative contributions of those different things bounce around a little. Costs go up for the delivery of some things and down for very few other things, but importantly, some other things. And the mix changes and the show goes on. And so my gloss on this biennium's version is that we are seeing the impacts of the great inflation of construction costs for a lot of things, for transmission, for onshore wind, for the conventional, what we would once have thought of as conventional alternatives to renewables, and the continuing reductions in cost of large and small-scale solar and battery storage. And the fact that we have had some progress in either delivering or just getting into actual delivery mode on some of the transmission projects that have been in the mix for years now, and others are switching around a bit. So this is a sunnier ISP and a little less windy, but still quite windy. Wind is a very important chunk of future generation, which we might come to the challenges that are being experienced in translating the generation part of this vision to reality around wind. It is leaning more heavily on batteries to do a lot of flexibility over the next couple of decades than gas. That was a move in previous editions, but it's even stronger now. But gas peakers are still lurking in, depending on which year you're looking at, even larger capacity numbers in this plan, because they remain the ultimate guarantor of adequacy of supply, even though then in the modelling they're not operating that much. So you might look at this and say, it's like they've just crossed out 2024 and written in 2026. The detail, the differences are of detail and nuance. As Luke said, there's a chunk of data center related demand in here. It's a very similar volume to the chunk of hydrogen electrolysis related demand that was in there last time and isn't very big now in the central scenario. But it's not a radical change, because the expert community who prepare this and who input on it through a wide consultation process don't think that radical change in the outlook is warranted. Alison and Frankie, what do you think? Do you think that's roughly right? This is very evolutionary, and do you think that more than evolution is needed?
This was actually a slightly boring ISP compared to previous years. I think, like you were saying, Tennant, people kind of said, not really much change here. One of the things I did notice is the way that AEMO went out of its way to point out that they have to include government policies as constraints on modelling.
Yes.
One of the things that's sort of, I think, becoming increasingly apparent with this is that this becomes very, very difficult for AEMO when essentially constraints imposed by different governments actually represent different future worlds which would not coexist.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine a future world where you have 9 gigawatts of offshore wind and all of the Queensland coal open. That's actually just kind of a perverse one.
Yeah.
It is pretty weird.
Yeah. For now it solves, but increasingly I think over time it's going to start to sort of get slightly more and more absurd. The other thing that I noticed about it was just a slightly more gas power generation capacity than there was last year. It's up to 14 gigawatts in 2050. I think it was 12 previous, or new gas capacity, that is. I think it was previously 12. When you look at how much that gas runs, though, you just look at it and go, how is that going to get paid?
Yeah.
14 gigawatts of gas that's only running roughly maybe 10% of the time, if that.
Yeah. That was going to be one of the few things that I would have commented on here, which is increasingly there's questions that need to be resolved off the back of this. And I wouldn't say these are new insights, right? But we're confirming this path looking ahead that gas is going to play increasingly less of a role in terms of being operational, but you still need the things there for when you need them. And so how you finance that then starts to become where the real pinch point is that needs resolving. And so the NEM review panel highlighted that in their findings and suggested a separate mechanism was going to be needed for that. And that feels right. When looking at the makeup of the rest of what we'll be dealing with, but I don't think that conversation is sort of sufficiently progressed yet in terms of what that looks like. But but it needs to. Other things I was going to say, and I guess it's also just sort of looking at the future mix, which, you know, as you've both said, isn't wildly different from where we would have seen it. But I guess sort of with the backdrop of current challenges that we're observing across the market, you start to look at, you know, gee, we still do need a lot of onshore wind. Like we need, you know, we need the diversity to cope with changes in weather, time of day needs and all of that. And so the viability or not of the current kind of slate of, you know, wind is facing into like particularly challenging circumstances at the moment. So we don't get here unless we can solve for that. So that's becoming obvious. And the other, I guess, sort of opportunity side is just how big the rooftop and small-scale solar looks. Like I think we already look at rooftop penetration in Australia as like we have some of the highest globally, but we're seeing sort of, a couple of multiples more on a 2050 time horizon. It's interesting to see what's going to drive that. Like, you know, I think we've got good penetration at the household level, but we need to see that even deeper over the next little while, as well as a former passion area of mine in the commercial and industry space. Like we have a lot of business premises or other kinds of non-residential structures that we could be covering in rooftop solar. And, you know, it's not the fact that the economics of solar don't stack up, because they do. Like that's been sort of demonstrated for a long time now. It's does it make sense for the circumstances of the premises that you're putting it on? Like shoving a bunch of solar on top of a mostly empty warehouse that doesn't have, you know, the load that requires that solar means you've got to have smart solutions that don't exist inside the building to be able to on-share or kind of trade that energy. So it highlights where some of these other challenges around how you start to coordinate this increasingly distributed set of generation coming online looks like. To even just sort of looking at that future mix, it's like, oh wow, we still have like quite a lot to do. It's some really thorny issues. I had a question for both of you, and I know this has been the subject of a little bit of commentary more of late. Do you think that the sort of, if we're lucky to see a really fast kind of penetration of EVs from today, dramatically changes this picture over the next couple of years? Like, do you think ISP 28 looks much different if we get things like vehicle to grid or some of the smarts done well?
I think it depends. One of my colleagues was looking today at when you take the most recent data of EV uptake and compare that to, you know, like the old ISP assumption, there was actually a fairly ambitious uptake of EVs already built in. And when you look at where we're going now with extra sales of EVs, we're only tracking slightly above where that was. I think one of the things that was new sort of demand-wise on this one was a little bit more for data centres than it previously had. The thing is that like data centres and EVs are slightly different. EVs are going to be much larger load than data centres are, but they're distributed. They're sort of everywhere, whereas the data centres are lumpy and noisy. The thing to watch for is how quickly that first generation of EVs start to diffuse through to the second-hand market and hang around, because I think we're still in a world where most people don't buy their cars new.
Yeah.
Like we're at 50% of sales last month were EVs, but the vast majority of people don't buy new cars.
Yeah.
It is going to be interesting. I'm going to be watching the projections at the end of the year, the emissions projections as well, for the same reason, to see whether we start seeing that transport curve bending in a way that it just hasn't done for since forever, pretty much, except COVID.
I mean, maybe the other way I would have like framed a question back to both of you as well is like, I actually take some comfort in the fact that this wasn't a very exciting document in some respects, right?
Make energy boring again.
Yes. And so, you know, whilst I think 2 years ago I don't think any of us, or maybe Tennant, you would have predicted the data centers going to be a thing. Maybe not as big a thing.
I did not see just how data center mad we would be at this point.
Yeah.
And I'm still not sure how much of this stuff is actually going to happen.
Yeah.
Like I have spoken with people who are selling kit to data center developers who are both extremely excited to be selling a lot of things and very definite that they genuinely are selling a lot of things. Like concrete activity is for real big. I've also spoken to a bunch of people who are financial analysts or risk assessors or people involved in assessing ultimately the AI services sector that these data center developments are all in aid of, who are like, geez, looks pretty bubbly to me. Don't know if the bubble's going to deflate a little in 6 days or 6 months or 6 years, but hard to see the justification for some of these valuations. And I don't know. And I do not envy the task of AEMO or anybody else in trying to put a credible number on what we need to be ready for and try to develop towards being ready for that. Because the consequences of error either way are quite large.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting because it does in some ways remind me of the ISP in 2020 when it had this big chunk in it that was called hydrogen. There's always a chunk at the top of the demand stack which is kind of latest cool thing / use of electricity you have not thought of yet.
Yeah.
And that's always going to be there. It's just what actually takes it up is potentially just going to be different from ISP to ISP.
Yeah, exactly. So known unknowns in terms of things like we know there's going to be the latest and greatest thing that comes up. But I guess the thing you could take comfort from in one respect, but then really, really reinforces the need to engage with the really hard stuff of getting these core components of our energy mix kind of rolled out, that only needs to be reinforced now from then on, because regardless of some of that other kind of noise that might change the shape of that a little bit, it looks like we're looking for a hell of a lot more rooftop solar and utility solar, but we need to do a chunk more onshore wind, and the offshore wind is not an insubstantial proportion on 2050 now either. That just doesn't seem to be going anywhere quickly enough, right?
Well, if you think it's a good idea, then it needs to go like the clappers to make the contribution it's meant to. In Victoria, and this is Victorian offshore wind. There is at this point very little prospect of any offshore wind being either economic or policy required anywhere else in the country. In Victoria, it is policy required, and it is the policy. There is bipartisan interest in it, which is not true of a lot of other aspects of energy right now. In part because the state opposition are they are leaning into concerns by regional communities about stuff being built near them. And one way of leaning into that is, let's go ahead with the first stage at least of the offshore wind target. It's pretty expensive. Way.
I mean, I think that's the thing in this ISP, right, is it builds exactly 90 gigawatts of wind because that's a constraint, right? That's actually the assumption driving the model.
Yeah.
And it does
if it wasn't told to, it wouldn't do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so a thing that is the only logical alternative to that Victorian offshore wind target would be to substantially intensify the use of the already described onshore renewable energy zones. You wouldn't need a bunch more zones necessarily. You wouldn't even need to fill out that much more of those zones because they're pretty lightly utilised in the existing Plan A. But you'd need to do something like that and less offshore wind would have to mean more onshore wind, more solar, more storage, and more or bigger interconnection. I've got one more question for like a lightning round.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, what do you think we should look out for in ISP 2028 as a thing that will have evolved by then, or that we hope will have evolved by then? Like one thing each.
I feel like it's coordination of behind-the-meter loads. So whether that's like mandatory or voluntary sign-ups to VPPs for batteries, or, I mean, I also would just love to see more of a rollout of, you know, like the other kind of big bits of household kit, like air conditioners and hot water heaters and stuff that are like ready to be programmed to sort of play their role in fitting the required kind of usage and curves through the day. Like, it'd be cool to see that reflected.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll have the DSU by the time we have the next one, right? Which means we'll have the data to inform that. My thing would be, so one of the things that this ISP does do in a deeply buried appendix is actually impose some constraints on gas that are to do with gas infrastructure, and the fact that in order for that 17 gigawatts of gas to run, it actually needs to be able to get gas. Previous ISPs have assumed you can have all the gas you want at $12 a gigajoule, which is no longer a very good assumption on either price or volume. I would hope for the next one, what they actually start to do is trade off between either on the geographic location of the GPG and or on, do you need to build more gas infrastructure, or do you build electricity infrastructure in a different place so that you don't have to build the gas infrastructure? Because that's the kind of thing where the gas and the electricity markets are becoming much increasingly enmeshed, is because of gas moving to that very residual role and gas demand declining in the rest of the economy. It's not just about how does gas get paid, it's also how does it physically get the gas that it needs to run.
Yep. I would love it if the next ISP had inputs that included some modelable assumptions about advanced geothermal, but that won't be the case by mid to late next year when the assumptions are locked in for 2028. That's maybe an ISP 2030 thing. So I think more internalisation of just how much we might need to do and be able to do with batteries, given how much capital cost inflation there has been on everything else, or almost everything else. For example, the cost of installing a synchronous condenser has gone up. It has doubled or more since assumptions of a couple of years ago behind a bunch of regulatory proposals. Are we just going to learn to do everything that we want to do or have to do, and learn to be confident enough in that with the grid forming batteries that are going to be there anyway? And what does that do to the speed and the shape of what can spit out of the model in 2 years' time? I don't know, but I'll be interested to see.
Shall we talk about a report?
Ooh,
always wanted to say that.
Yes. We love this.
What did Luke even
Alison
come back from his cup of tea for?
Yeah.
You do it, Luke. You do your lead in, Luke. I'm not taking over your podcast.
Shall you chat about it? Yeah.
We shall.
Yes.
Energy market governance is a topic that is unlikely to hit the headlines anytime soon, but it is central to the issues that get focused on, how those issues are framed and the solutions that are arrived at. And at a time of rapid transition from a highly centralised system to a highly distributed one, characterised by novel technologies, business models and consumer behaviours, perhaps it is time to take a step back and think through whether our formal and informal governance structures are up to the task, or could they do with a revamp? That is the premise of a new report produced by the Energy Efficiency Council with the support from Race for 2030 titled Power Dynamics, Energy Governance in Australia. In it, the report's author, Rob Murray-Leach, posits that in this period of flux, getting good outcomes from our energy system will require us to think carefully about who makes decisions, how those decisions get made, and where they source the insights and expertise on which the decisions are based. It is a big topic, but given my role as CEO of the Energy Efficiency Council, using LMSU as a soapbox to sound off on it is clearly in breach of our no self-dealing rule. So, Frankie, unconflicted Frankie, tell me while I sit back and take a sip of my cup of tea, what did you make of this report?
Well, for one, I was really delighted that this is a thing that exists and has been given some really careful thought and attention by long-time energy policy knower and friend of the pod, Rob Murray-Leach, who thankfully, given the focus of this work, is a big G governance nerd, like a couple of us here. I think one of the sort of central observations of this report that's, I think, just got, frankly, like a lot of very sensible, what should be seen as relatively uncontroversial areas of recommendations, is the observation that our energy transition is no longer just a technical challenge, that is increasingly a governance challenge, and that as our energy systems are becoming more decentralised and complex, like so too then is the range of interests and perspectives you need to factor in to the decision making that shapes how this gets rolled out. And I mean, I think the other bit of context for this report, which I don't think actually appears in the report itself, but it should be seen as a continuation of work from a couple of years before. That was a sort of governance paper that EEC produced in partnership with a few other industry bodies that have had a long-held kind of interest in this topic. That was ACOS, Tennant, your current still employer at Australian Industry Group, my former employer at the Property Council of Australia. I'd say that paper focused a lot more on kind of the history of the problem diagnosis, whereas this paper, I think it's fair to say, is entirely kind of solutions focused. Most of the paper is actually a kind of discussion of the different reform recommendations and how, the sort of structure of that has been arrived at. So I'd say it's sort of less concerned with torturing ourselves with the long sordid history so much on energy governance in Australia and all the problems. And there's a very long list of papers that have been drawn on and referenced for that purpose. Rob spoke to over 100 experts in the field, many in the format of kind of Chatham House rule. So, really like a closed door, let it all hang out, people. I want to go deep on all of your thoughts. And it sounds like he engaged very widely. And he came up with 7 areas of reform, each with a few different sets of recommendations under them. So I might just quickly name check them, but keen to then dive into which of those you found most compelling, or which might have surprised you. The first one goes to matching reforms to the appropriate level of government. This is kind of one, reiterating the observation that you have decision-making happening at different levels of government. You've always got the federal government has different levers. Much of the functioning of energy markets sits with state and territory governments, but you've increasingly got a growing role for consumers and people who are the owners or sort of managers of distributed energy infrastructure, calibrating decision-making to the right level. Improving integration, coordination and collaboration. Third area is expanding demand-side policy capability. That's a thing that all of us can probably go pretty long on when we want to. The fourth area was one that I was particularly interested in, and that was actively seeking diverse views and interests. And I'd say there's a an observation there around, I guess, sort of the dynamic thing that can be created where you have a lot of consultations run by technically focused energy market bodies, and those that are most able and sort of capable in engaging in those processes are often the better resourced big industry participants, frequently less so consumer advocates and industry groups there. The fifth area is increasing investment in policy relevant research, the classic more research required recommendation that tends to feature prominently in a lot of reports we read. The sixth one is on providing better data, modelling and information infrastructure with a strong flavour of centralisation. And the seventh one is on refining institutional roles with some more specific suggestions for the three energy market bodies. So I certainly had favourites within these categories, but what did you guys make of the report?
Well, one thought there is that it's really interesting and I think really, really positive and useful for everybody who was hungry for a governance report to stop and think about in engaging with this, is that Rob has left the bit that many people might have expected to be like the whole of a governance report, which is, we've got this existing complex governance structure of three bodies with different roles and responsibilities. He's left the should those roles and responsibilities change and should there be structural reform there to the end, because there is those issues are actually really hard to do, and the report has the view that while there are processes underway to look at those structures, should AEMO change its corporate form or have a functional split in its responsibilities, for instance? Should the AER and the AEMC be merged? Those things are big. The benefits are arguable for different ones of them, and there's a lot else that goes into the actual success of our governance of energy that is not those moving organisational boxes around on a flowchart, and you are required to think about all of those things before you get to, or should we change some acronyms? And I think that's really, really good. We should broaden our thinking, and this paper did broaden my thinking. So, one big tick there from me.
Yeah, I think that's right, that there's a lot of the things that are in these themes are things that you should do regardless of how many boxes you have on the org charts and what the acronyms in them are, because they actually go to I think that's one of the nice things about the report, is what it unearths is that there are some real fundamentals that are actually very shaky, and that actually sort of bleeds through into a lot of the governance problems that we have. So things like integration and coordination, the fact that the demand side is perpetually underdone, the fact that energy ministers often just don't want to take hard decisions.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what governance structure you've got. If you've got a bunch of energy ministers who don't want to take hard decisions, well, then nothing is going to change. Yeah. And I think also, just to pick up on that point you made, Frankie, about the need to get more of the energy user into the consultation process and actually properly listening to them, that we have this whole, thousands of pages of national electricity law and national gas law and national energy retail law that all start with an objects clause about the consumer, and then the consumer doesn't really get to participate properly in the process of any of the change to this. I'm not sure that, I think Rob's idea was to just put more funding into expert consumer representation. But he also points out that the way that you do it matters as well, that something like focus groups might be a much better way to do it rather than what we do at the moment, which is, you put out an issues paper and people write a submission, and then you put out a different issues paper and people write more submissions, and so on. that it's actually how you go about doing it is going to have a big bearing on the quality of information that you get back.
Yeah, I so agree. I thought one of the really thoughtful kind of like I think recommendations kind of appear throughout those 7 themes that go to this, but it was that reaction to the traditional model of consultation, if you like, where we've got these highly technical processes to date have mostly been run by these market bodies, and it's a we propose, you respond type model. And I think he really, like, understandably kind of takes issue with that as the model that should be used ongoing, and has some things to say around one. Like, of course, the energy market bodies have lots of very smart people working away, and perhaps a better way to manage the many competing demands on people's time, both within those bodies but also in the broader stakeholder universe, is to perhaps reduce the load of what the market bodies are tasked with, and to free them up to focus a little bit more on their defined core business, and instead pursue a couple of different models for doing, work that for some things, and maybe this is, Alison, where your point around governments not wanting to make hard decisions, where some of this comes in, is you set up, more at arm's length processes where you've got independent chairs appointed, and you are setting a good 18 months to 2 years with secondments of people with kind of key expertise from within government, perhaps from the market bodies, but also stakeholder groups. And you're giving those kind of big meaty issues the time and focus that they deserve, but by hiving them off into a kind of a more considered process, rather than coming at the same issue 20 times in 20 different consultations without ever really getting to like the root cause of some of the issues. I really like that vein of recommendations.
I was a bit on the fence about it, to be honest, because like there have been some AEMC processes, for example, lately that have gone on for a very long time, and people get very tired of that engagement. And I mean, I think that sort of we propose, you respond thing has its place, because, not everybody is comfortable starting from a position of kind of like, what do we even want out of the energy system? They're kind of just, and actually they find it much easier to participate if you say, here are 3 options for how we put information on your bill. Which one do you like? Rather than what should even the role of information on the bill be? To me, one of the problems that you've got is that we get stuck in using the same model for everything, rather than using that longer, more deliberative model for really big, chunky issues. But what you actually then want off the back out of that is to go, okay, so that needs a rule change. Let's get that done in 3 months.
Yeah.
And do it fast.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with all of that. Like, I think such is like the times that we live in, where the luxury of taking 2 years to slowly unpick and debate the intricacies of an issue, and then, perhaps even that period again to implement it, like, is pretty out of step with the job that needs doing in the energy transition. So there definitely does need to be that emphasis on speed, but then like that needs to be resourced properly, I think, is one of the other kind of recurring themes in Rob's report here.
So there were 2 things that I was cautious about here. Well, maybe more than 2. So one is that there's a real need, and this is called out in the paper, but also the paper's recommendations, I think, collectively serve as a challenge for this, the need for prioritisation. Because if you're going to get the market bodies to do less of something, so they have more staff time to loan staff out to cross-organisational task groups, well, what are the things that they need to do less of? If you're going to prioritise some of the issues that are outlined here to get more focus, such as the demand side in general and the interests and voices of less represented groups. Prioritise is not about the one thing that you're like adding to the priority of or putting on the agenda. You must be altering the priority of other things as well. And which things? People who are on the wrong side of a prioritisation or reprioritisation don't like it. They will push back if they become aware of it. How do you ensure that you're actually prioritising rather than adding on a few more tiers to a laundry list? And that is essential to make this brace of recommendations work. I thought there was lots of gold in here and also some things that, I'm not sure if that would work, but like worth a look, worth a go. But there's so much, 7 themes, 3 to 8 recommendations under each theme. Some of those things are very synergistic. They work together really well. Some of them are several goes at a similar sort of thing. And just that priority issue is essential. There's stuff in there, for instance, about improving consultation in order to improve the perception of legitimacy of the decisions that are ultimately taken and earn more social license. Do we believe that more consultation leads to more social license, or is it necessary to sort of say, well, we have a set of priorities of outcomes and values that we're trying to live, and like at the top of the tree is effectiveness. Did you get the thing done? And the manner in which it is done is important too. But like the sine qua non is, did you get the thing done? Anyway, so I think people will disagree with that priority ordering that I just did. But that's an essential thing to thrash out, to pick which of these are going to go forward and how. And more broadly, we were talking about the ISP. To get anything like the scale of what's in the ISP done, you definitely have got to live brutal prioritisation.
I'm going to disagree with a little bit of what you said there. I'm not.
Go for me.
I'm not sure that Rob's advocating here more in the form of quantity consultation. I actually think one of the observations, and this is central to conversations we've been having for years, you've got stakeholder groups systemically underrepresented and not given the right level of opportunity to feed into process. The system really works against consumer advocates, and other kind of less resourced bodies sort of making their contribution and participation. I think his suggestion is you need to reform some of the processes that we currently have to better enable those type of stakeholders to engage. And in some cases, that means less consultation periods, but, potentially bundling together of issues where, actually sort of some of the core things overlap, and what we've actually been doing is kind of over consulting because we're not ever really getting to the root cause of some of the things that are big that are really big challenges. I think two things that I think the paper had highlighted that would be contenders for those more deliberative, processes is energy productivity. So what to do on the demand side in a cohesive, strategic way, and network regulation, which I know, Alison, that's been a key kind of passion project of yours, and is kind of it needs a really solid focus.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of this is that not everybody needs to be consulted on every single thing, and that actually part of that prioritisation process should potentially be really deeply thinking about who needs to be involved, like who should be involved. Rob sort of pointed out the need to kind of weight stakeholder input, given that, he was sort of looking at it in terms of there being an overrepresentation on the supply side. And, just not that many people who submit on the demand side. But, I think there's also examples of that. If you look at the pricing review that the AEMC's recently done, for example, I remember going to one of the meetings of that and someone saying in that meeting that there had been this huge volume of submissions that were generated off the back of a single article in Renew Economy that put a call out and said, this thing that they're doing with pricing is terrible and you should write a submission on it. I think that is sort of, it goes to the fact that there was obviously quite a group that was going to get very het up about that particular issue, who were out there and not engaged until this, particular article appears, but also kind of shows that potentially they hadn't really thought through about who's going to be, that you do stakeholder engagement for different reasons. You do it to gather people's views, but you also can sort of do defensive consultation as well, which is like making sure you deliberately talk to the people who are really going to arc up if this thing doesn't go their way. This is where the sort of thing around deliberative processes are quite good, because that actually forces groups of people into a room where they have to listen to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than everyone shouting at the AEMC or everyone shouting at AEMO. People change their views when they have to actually sit around a table with others and talk to them. Surprise? Who knew? Whereas a sort of that kind of ask, we propose, you respond kind of thing does not bring that out, because you don't have to listen to everybody else. You just write your submission and pop it in. Yeah. It's this sort of thing. He was sort of talking in here about going to sort of more of a co-creation model.
Yeah.
I think but again, you've got it, like that stuff takes a lot of time. Like the thing about the propose respond thing is that it's actually reasonably, well, it doesn't take too many resources. And once you've got a well-oiled machine that cranks that stuff out, you can just keep cranking the handle. Whereas co-creation is different every time.
Yes.
Because you've got a different group of people.
Yeah.
And there were some great thoughts in there about, and again, yes, it is absolutely true that not everybody has, to say the least, the time and the headspace for truly deep collaboration. But the points made in the paper about the kinds of collaboration that will get you the most actual cross-pollination, creativity, reflection of different perspectives, and tailoring to the real problem, inviting people in, getting cross-organisational teams using secondments, putting people together rather than just like saying, well, here's a problem, you are tasked to work on a solution. But getting in there and saying, well, what actually is the problem together can be an incredibly helpful place to start. On the consumer reps part, and there's so much else in here, but you definitely do need representatives as well as, and in some contexts, instead of, individual consumers and users, because you need people who actually have the time to dedicate to these processes. And even most business energy users do not have that luxury. But there's only so many experienced, highly skilled consumer reps out there at the moment, and they're all very busy being on a great many customer consultative bodies for different energy orgs. I'm on a few of these myself, and I see a lot of the same faces at the different ones. And it's not to say that nobody else can do it, but the ideas in here about financial support for growing the core functionality of consumer representative organisations, That would need to be done over an extended period to substantially grow the ecosystem of these blessed weirdos who enjoy learning about the weighted average cost of capital, for example.
Because if we are going to clone you and Craig Memory and Brian
Gavin
Spack
Duffy and Brian
Gavin
Spack.
Duffy, like this is a 30 to 40 year project, right? You know, this is not going to
We need to take DNA and brain samples now. These
Yeah.
people don't have 30 to 40 years.
Oh dear, heads in jars, here we come. Futurama style.
I lead a life of quiet dignity, I will say, while chomping at fish food sprinkled into my jar.
We could put your head just next to your glowing cube back there with your dice tower.
Quiet, you're conflicted out.
Yeah.
Conflicts mean no sharp remarks about my dice cube.
There's a lot in all of this, and one way of kind of trying to sum up or bring this to a head, like, was there anything you guys violently disagreed with in the recommendations?
I've got one more. Apart from the, like, where's the money coming from part, which is addressed but not resolved. My bit is it actually possible or a bit high risk to aspire towards both some specific ideas in here for a body and a broader preference for an ecosystem of policy thought and input to government that is funded by government, listened to by government, but not under the thumb of government? Or is that going to lead to some version of people who are saying things government wants to hear and nothing else, or people who are tuned out by government and defunded the next time there's an opportunity in the budget? Like, can you have, like, access and money while standing a bit without?
I mean, I think there are examples where we do that reasonably well. But like you say, they wax and wane over time, right? So the Climate Change Authority in its current incarnation is, like, well-funded, well-staffed. It seems to be listened to. Is maybe a little bit, could be a little bit braver with government on its recommendations. But it has also been through periods where it's been almost entirely defunded, which has meant it's not able to do much more than its statutory role. Yeah, it's a tricky one, unless you can work your way into being someone like CSIRO, where you're just like kind of a national treasure, and people will, people who otherwise pay you no attention will get upset if you're defunded. It's a very tricky one, I think, to get right. I mean, I think Rob sort of did draw out in the paper that the way that we fund, like, Energy Consumers Australia, for example, is not funding from government. That's funding from us as energy consumers, right? It's paid for through our bills.
Yep.
I just kind of wonder sometimes how many energy consumers actually know that.
Yeah.
It's probably a little bit like the fact that, most people who have roadside assistance for their car probably don't realise that the AAA and the NRMA claim those numbers as we represent X million motorists, and then go off and lobby on stuff that they never ask you about.
Yeah.
It's a tricky thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I wouldn't categorize it as a criticism so much. I think mine is sort of on a similar vein. I think it shies away from being a bit sharper in terms of structural reform of the existing, and I really agree with the kind of editorial choice of sticking the piece on refining institutional roles at the very back, because I actually think some of the bigger challenges are more around how do we integrate all the other areas of policy that are not core energy policy but are increasingly enmeshed with it. So, like, my former kind of role focusing on building standards and the way that interacts with energy. Like you could more structurally address that in the way that you configure government departments and things like that. He did revisit what I would probably say was like the central ask of the previous paper that those 4 industry bodies put together, which was make it a body's job to sort of lead expertise and collaboration on demand side policy. It's not maybe as bold as saying establish a body that doesn't already exist. It says designate a body to be that, which you could read as something that already exists, and that feels like a deliberate choice here. I don't know, Rob, you can tell me otherwise when we next speak.
I think that's because there is a pretty high bar to establishing a new body, particularly in this context, because you have to figure out how to pay for it, and you also have to figure out the governance of that body itself. So, I mean, we do have, and Rob does go into this a bit in the paper, like AEMO's governance is very complex. For example, like it's kind of part owned by the states, part owned by market participants. AER is kind of comes under federal legislation. It's like because we've got this very mixed state, federal, and the thing of being needed to be owned by more than one state, you have to unpick all of that complexity as well if you want to have a demand side body that's new. One of the things when you write a report like this is you want governments to take notice of it, which means you can't have too many things in it where they look at that and just roll their eyes and go, well, for God's sake, I'm not going to do that. Give me something I can implement. And I think that there is a bit of that in this report of like making these, when I was sort of reading through all of the recommendations, it's kind of like, well, a lot of these, it's kind of like, well, you could do this right now. Like there's no barrier to doing this thing right now. Like putting people with demand side expertise on the board of some of the market bodies, for example.
You could indeed do that.
Yeah.
If you were of a mind to play fast and loose with the
I mean,
rules.
it might ruin their podcasting career. But,
That's
no
true.
consideration.
It's being tested at the moment. But like on the whole, I mean, like as you would expect from one Rob Murray-Leach, a really thoughtful contribution. And I think now really the ball is in the collective government's court. And I'll just say, like, I thought the report made a really decent splash when it was launched. And I don't know, Luke, I can see you like broadly there. I'm not sure if you're listening to us, but like, could you venture any comment on like how the report's been received? Like, straight bat, but like, has there been a lot of take up?
I think that it has, to I think Tennant's point earlier, this is not necessarily the report that people were expecting when they heard governance report. There aren't sort of major structural changes proposed to market bodies. Rob recommends approaching those sorts of things with a great deal of caution given the transaction costs associated with those. And I think when he got under the hood of, the actual lived experience of all the really committed people right across, industry and government and energy market institutions that are kind of like trying to solve this thing in real time, just found huge amounts that could be achieved without taking that on. I think Rob is profoundly concerned about, the time it would take to kind of like muck around with those structural changes when we actually just really need to get on with it and kind of like really thinking carefully about how we make decisions, where we make decisions, who's making the decisions and kind of like what is being fed in to the ecosystem so that we can make better decisions when the moment arises, because there is a need to kind of do the pre-thinking and for people to be out there kind of like cogitating on the issues that will arise in 2028 or 2029 or 2030, so that when you have that oh shit moment, there's something to draw upon off the shelf. So, yeah, I think that this one is a little bit of a slow burn. Like it is kind of like in the ecosystem and people are ruminating on it, and it'll be really interesting to see the influence it has over months and years to come.
Nice. Well, that feels like a report, Kang.
Indeed it does. Conflict managed.
Mischief ongoing.
As always, we close out the show with one more thing in which we all share something that is currently captivating our attention. Alison, beloved guest co-host, what have you got?
I was choosing between two things, but I am going to flag that there is an inquiry going on in the New South Wales Upper House at the moment into road user charging. This has come about because when New South Wales introduced legislation for road user charging, it had a trigger in it that said that it would come in when sales hit a particular number. I can't remember what it was, but I think it was 30%.
I think that's right.
It was going to be that or 2027. And the thing is that thanks to the fuel crisis, we're hitting that trigger pretty soon. That is not why this inquiry has been taking place. It was a statutory inquiry, but it has been very interesting to watch the responses to this inquiry from different lobby groups, including people who seem to want to re-prosecute the constitutionality question and call into question whether New South Wales can even do this thing. I also get the impression that New South Wales government is in some ways just playing chicken with that and going, go on then, take us to court. And perhaps throwing that gauntlet down to the federal government, who would then have to choose whether they joined one side or other of that particular case, which would very much bring road user charging back into something where, going back to something I said before, we need someone to make a decision somewhere about who is going to do this hard thing, and it's not really clear where it has to be the federal government or the state government, but it's going to need to get done.
Well said. Frankie, what have you got?
Okay, guys, this one more thing has been at least 20 years in the making. Probably longer, if we're honest. In the last couple of weeks, home energy ratings are a thing.
That was my guess.
Like, holy shit.
Yeah, so the first time that I subbed in for you on the podcast, Frankie, when you were off, that was my one more thing, was to wish it a very happy 19th anniversary to that decision.
Yep.
The decision, I think we should be clear, Alison, of, I guess, energy ministers in like 2004.
Something like that.
To put in place mandatory home energy ratings.
Yep.
And here we are.
Here we are. So we've got the scheme that can deliver that. Finally. And like so many others who have been working in this space for a really long time, it's just such a delight to see this thing like actually out there in the world. I even went as far as to say, I'll volunteer for the trial. I had one of the assessors over to do my house, and like, what a lovely experience. Luke, you were there that day.
I was indeed.
Because
eyeballing that hapless assessor.
That's right. And he recognised you, and it was really funny. He was like, is that Luke?
He had his worst day at work ever.
Totally didn't know what he was in for when he rocked up. But just amazing to get to this point. And now we've got to crack on with the disclosure piece of the puzzle. And, we all know a lot of really good work and thinking has been going into that. And there's some bright prospects, particularly I'd say New South Wales, of that getting some wings soon. So let's focus all of our positive energies on that. But in the meantime, my goodness, 20 years ago, this should have been a thing. And today, it finally is, and now we can crack on with all the other stuff that needs to happen. Mandatory disclosure. Let's go, people. Let's go. So good. I'm just so happy. Yeah, giddy the fuck up. Let's go. That's the second F-bomb in a row I've dropped. I think it's a vibe, mid-year
Getting very
vibe.
sweary. We might have to look at that explicit rating.
Indeed.
You're ruining our G rating.
You can beep that out, Mark, if you like.
The primary school kids won't be able to satisfy their passion for energy and climate policy papers anymore. Well, they will. It'll have a cachet of danger.
Tennant, what have you got?
I have gone down a rabbit hole, and people, you're coming down with me. Thanks to the delightful Blue Sky account ToughSF at bisky.social, I became aware of a paper that was, it turns out, one of a series of papers on fleshing out the concept of fighting climate change by blocking out the sun, not by sticking sulfur particles in the stratosphere, but by building a sunshade between the Earth and the sun, and putting that sunshade at the L1 Lagrange point in the Earth-Sun system. And this is a thing that people have been devoting a lot of attention to. And even though I am obsessively interested in space stuff, I'm also obsessively annoyed by dumb space stuff. And this is classic dumb space stuff. In order to find an easier path to fight climate change. These people, by the way, I should say, don't say you don't need to reduce emissions. They say we're not doing it fast enough and we need to damp down the effects of climate change to buy us time. But the easy path to buy us time requires building in deep space an object with a surface area 1.5 times the size of Western Australia. If you were to do the version of that is just these big solar sails that don't do anything except sail themselves into position, then you would need to launch from the Earth 12,000 times the total mass that we put into orbit in 2025 for what the authors generously estimate to be merely a few $1 trillion. Or, people get really excited about this kind of version, build solar power satellites at the Earth-Sun L1 point by building an entire lunar/asteroidal industrial ecosystem to mine, refine and manufacture all of this kit, equivalent to 4 million times the mass launched from the Earth last year, and generate in the process 200,000 times all the electricity generated on Earth last year. It does seem like there are easier ways to fight climate change, possibly involving the transformation of only 1 to 3 times the electricity output of the Earth last year. So I encourage people to not put all their eggs in this particular basket, which is a basket for people who are looking for excuses to do cool stuff in space.
Amazing.
Okay, for my one more thing, I am aware that we sometimes veer into political territory. We are not, in fact, a political podcast, but I think that for anyone working in climate and energy, even if you feel fiercely that this is not something that you want to do with your time, should catch up with Pauline Hanson's press club speech. As she spends not a small amount of time on climate and particularly energy, and the energy bit of it, and particularly the renewable energy transition, is central to her thesis around the things that are causing Australia to circle the drain at this very moment. And I think that as advocates, it is important that we engage with this. The ascent of One Nation in the polls is, unprecedented in any of our lifetimes. The fracturing on the right is something that we all need to think carefully about. The fragile consensus around net zero, firmly in the rear vision mirror now. And we need to work out how to deal with it. And the first thing to do is to kind of engage with and think through the positions of the parties that are attracting the attention of the Australian electorate. And even if every fibre of your being resists spending an hour and a half to an hour and 40 minutes listening to that press club address, I think that is what we all need to do. And so there will be a link in the show notes.
So, dear listeners, having sat through this much eating your vegetables on energy governance, You are now told to eat a plate of bitter greens instead.
Well, like a true Italian, I ate my salad first. I've already watched that. I don't need a repeat experience.
All right. Public service announcements dispensed with. We are almost done. But every fortnight after the show, we record a bonus episode called There Is Too Much, in which we grab a drink, put our feet up on the desk and talk about something we didn't have time to cover on the main show. And we're just, picking a topic from the Rolodex tenet today, something that we just feel like talking about and seems apposite to talk about it, given Alison is with us. What are we dealing with on this week's bonus episode?
A subject that is universally beloved, the diesel tax rebate. I love it. You love it. Everyone loves it. And what's to be done about this thing that we all love? Well, we'll find out on the other side of a paywall.
Run, don't walk. Let me
Indeed.
You will find a Sport LMSU tab at the top of the page. You too can find out, whether we really love the diesel tax rebate, and if maybe we don't, what we should do about it to fix it. So many ideas on that front. That is all we have time for today. This podcast is edited by Energy Professional and podcast tragic Mark Spencer from Here Media Studio. Frankie, you like promoting things. What would you like to promote today?
I am going to double down on my one more thing. I want to name check some of the people that have been involved in delivering home energy ratings, noting that this has been a 20-year or thereabouts endeavour. No, I'm serious about using this little moment for shout-outs. This feels like the time to do that. So, with apologies, because I'm definitely going to miss people, and you guys can probably contribute some names. But there's a couple of people that really sort of spring to mind as being along the ride for a really, really long time in getting that really big kind of reform out there in the world. So Jodie Pipcorn, who has been a long time DQer and has been so passionate about residential energy efficiency for certainly as long as I've known her, which has got to be in the 10 to 15 year kind of range, was really instrumental in the early parts of this and was very much there to see it through. So amazing work, Jodie. And Anthony Wright at CSIRO, who are providing up much of the technical background in terms of the tools itself that are going to be used to deliver these ratings. His team and Anthony personally have been on this journey for a very long time as well. And just a massive shout out to the Resi team in the energy productivity branch of DQ. That's, I think, currently headed by Chris Videroni, who's been running that team for the last little while until recently, managed by a dear friend of the pod, Claire McLaughlin, who's, again, really embraced the need for this work to happen alongside advocates, like us that have been out there sort of calling for this for a long time. Folks like Davina Rooney at the Green Building Council, Kelly Court at ACOS, Jenny Edwards, long-time energy efficiency expert, breaking it down for regular folks. She does this great little she's got a great Insta. Jen Lish, Fix It Chicks, go look at them. They've got a way bigger following than us anyway, so they don't need our help. But anyway, just some of the very, very many people that have been working towards landing this in for a really long time. So I just wanted to shout out to them. That's all.
Here. For Frankie Muskich and Tennant Reid and Alison Reeve, I'm Luke Menzel. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon. We didn't have time for Energy Crisis Corner on LMSU this week, but we are pleased to bring you this exclusive external update on the latest situation.
Turning and turning in the widening gyre, The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The centre cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out, when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born?
That was from a preprint of the International Energy Agency's oil market report for July 2026. For further projections, please consult a tarot deck or chant the name of Brent Crude 3 times in front of your mirror at midnight.